Welcome to Turn Extension, a supplemental podcast for the Advanced Maneuvers YouTube channel.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Turn Extension. My name is Tony, or Polar Bear Cub on the forums.
Hey everybody, it's Kevin Dowdark. Somewhere on the world, in the internet, somewhere.
Hey, what do you say? This is Cutthroat Cured.
Oh my god, you're not going to start beatboxing, are you?
Hey, what do you say? My name's Kevin, and I'm not okay.
We don't need people thinking that we're starting this cast negative, okay? We gotta be upbeat.
We are positive.
Oh, is this where like the psychologist tells you you're only supposed to use I statements? I feel like you're about to start beatboxing.
I feel that I took my medicine this morning, so we're good.
Oh my god! All right,
hey,
so
a little bit of an announcement. We think that we've taken care of the squeaky seat issue, so hopefully today's people's ears will be fixed. Bad news is that Tony's child is in a tizzy, so it's very possible that she's going to lose her shit at any time during this cast.
Yep, so if that does happen, I will mute and wander away, so we will see how much I can talk today. As of right now, she's doing good, but also because she's sitting on my lap. So we'll see.
Yes, and we fixed the chair issue. Ear.
So let's go into a little bit of news and announcements for the recent area. So a little bit of news. So for any of those Grimkin fans out there, you might want to check out the Warmachine and Hordes painting group, because a few advanced copies of the Skin and Moans model was released at Origins to very little notice to people, and a few lucky individuals were able to snag it, I guess, at Origins. So that's kind of cool. So there has been a few people working on early copies of this model. So if you're excited for Grimkin and you just need every little tidbit that you can, there's some fun ones out there.
What's been the feedback from the people who got those early ones? Is it a clean?
They said it's the cleanest model they've ever had. Cleanest model is the quote that came up. It said the cleanest model I have ever seen Privateer put out. And that
So in your opinion, what is the quote-unquote cleanest model? What does that look like?
No mold lines, I'm thinking. A little bit of extra crap on it.
They said barely any flash, and they said super manageable mold line. So any mold line is probably in an area that doesn't matter, so you can easily clean it. Warders were some of the worst, with their mold lines directly in the middle of their face.
Yeah, that's how it was with, what was it? Not Stormwall. When the first Stormclad / Reliant kits came out, it was right across their face as well.
So yeah, it's definitely, that's a cool little piece of tidbit. So in today's cast, we're talking about K, which is keep on painting. And so we've decided that we're going to just discuss the ins and outs of focusing and keeping focus while painting. Who wants to start with a little bit of their input?
Well, I guess actually before we get started into it, I wanted to dive into, you had a bit of a situation on your end with your studio and some struggles that you've been dealing with. Can you kind of walk people through what has been the turmoil on your end, and that might give us a sense of, okay, when you're faced with this situation, how do you get around it?
Okay, so recently, last year, when I went to Lock and Load 2016, I entered into the Master Craftsman competition and ended up winning Best Painted Army, which was a very big thing for me because I had spent so long working on one army, that looked really good together. I had also entered into the P3 painting competition because I was trying to push myself as a painter. And I didn't place in anywhere. I did get a participation, but I did get a lot of really good feedback from my dear friend Dallas Kemp. And we kind of made this agreement last year that, I may have given him some, okay stuff last year, but I was really going to pull out all of the stops for Lock and Load 2017. And it's just been something very, very exciting. And I've not been able to tell him about any of my pieces or anything I'm working on, but just letting him know that, I was really excited about doing it. Well, becoming a new father and all of the other stuff that goes on in my life, including work, has just really hindered a decent amount of my time, not to mention, as you might have heard in some of our earlier casts, I've just been very unmotivated in a lot of things that deal with privateer press recently. Well, one of those has been painting, and it's not just painting privateer press, but it's painting in general. And as we get closer and closer to lock and load, the more and more I've realized that I haven't done anything for the P3 painting competition to kind of uphold my end of the bargain when it comes to Dallas. So my studio has been an absolute disaster. I have a basement studio, and it's quite large, and it's also become a drop-in for all of the stuff that I receive. So, I have some review stuff, I have some new models, I have, D&D stuff. The studio's just gotten crazy, and it's become Devin left this upstairs, I'm just going to go and drop it right there in front of the door of the basement. So everything makes it into the basement and then kind of stacks up. So one of my biggest concerns recently is, as I've been trying to paint, it's been hard for me to look at painting when my studio is so dirty. So I've been like, well, I need to clean my studio, which I haven't done because I always find an excuse. And then I was finding an excuse that every time I went to paint something to have fun and, paint something for fun, well, I couldn't paint that because I needed to finish something for the P3. And that was just stressing me. And the overall, moral of that story was I lost all motivation, and I actually was stressing myself out so much that I was trying to paint for another reason than just enjoying painting. So that has been a huge, a weight on me recently, and I've actually gotten less done, even though I knew that I had more and more that I needed to do. So I finally decided to make, and I contacted Dallas about this, I finally decided to make the statement that I wasn't going to specifically paint for the P3 painting competition this year, that it was just too stressful, and that I need to enjoy more of just painting in general than trying to paint for a reason and making myself more miserable, because, that's definitely going to reflect itself in the finished piece.
So I want to take that for a second, because I hear what you're saying, and honestly, you're not the first person that I've heard kind of making those statements about, frustrations with painting and stuff like that. And I want to actually break down a couple of things. One of the things that was a bit of an eye-opener for me actually was, when I went with you to Lock and Load, I myself have never participated in like a true to form painting competition. I've always had the, you go to a local event or something like that, and somebody gets picked out as the, best painted army or best painted model or, player's choice and stuff like that. But those weren't necessarily a painting competition so much as a painting vote in a actual tournament setting, whereas at no point in time were you ever going to be using the models on the table. These would be models that are, well, I guess you could. I mean, you have used your Mountain King before, but these are models that you specifically spent hundreds of hours on to make good for the purpose of competition painting. And I can't help but draw parallels to the competitive painting end of Warmachine and Hordes versus the competitive playing end of Warmachine and Hordes. In the competitive playing, you have people who are very narrative based, or who are just running casual games, or they're, they maybe every once in a while participate in a tournament, but they're never really looking to quote unquote be the best, be the winner. They just kind of want to judge where they are in the scale of things. And then it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like from the competitive painting side of the hobby, you almost get the exact same parallels. You get some people who want to paint it, they paint it narratively, they paint it to the theme or to the studio scheme because that's the narrative scope. Your trolls are always blue, your Signars are always blue, or they'll put some extra time into the base to give it a narrative feel to it. Like, these Signar players aren't just playing on, or they're not marching on a field of painted dirt, they're marching on a cityscape, or they're marching over lava bases or something like that. And then you get people who participate in these kind of competitive painting things, and they're just kind of doing it to see, where do they rank in the scales? They're not going to expect to get gold and silver and bronze, but they want to see, where do I fall in this? Where can I improve? Where can I get better? And then you have the actual people who are like, I don't even play the damn game, but I paint the models to participate in these competitions to win first place. Like, that's their goal. And it seems like on both sides of the track, from playing the tournament game versus painting in competitive painting, that you have parallels to it. Is that a wrong impression, or is it? Am I wrong in that? Is competitive painting not in its own community with its own elite painters and novice painters and so forth?
Once you decide to get into competitive painting, one of the biggest things I learned at Lock and Load last year, Dallas looks me in the face, and I had entered 3 pieces. I had entered my Mold, I had entered my Janissa. So I entered Mulg into Beast, I entered Janissa into Single, and then I entered my Mountain King into Large Model. And the main thing about all 3 of them, there was a lot of little, really good feedback, shading, specific, focus on lighting. I think the biggest focus is that Dallas says to me, I don't want to see these bases. These bases should not be here. This is not a gaming piece. This is a competition piece. So then you start working with, display. You start working with like having a display base, or having like a, why am I blanking on it? Like, what's the piece of wood that they sit on?
Balsa wood?
No.
Plinth?
A plinth, right. So you should have them on a wood plinth. You should have, basically, your model should be one complete piece. It should speak to something. This is not a piece that, you're going to be putting down. Now, some people have, will pull the model off and put it back onto a gaming base. Some people will actually mix the gaming base into it and then cover it up. But the main focus is that it shouldn't be on a gaming base unless it's so fantastic that basically it just defies gravity, and it can make up for the fact that it's on a gaming base just by how beautiful the painting. And the guy who actually won Grandmaster last year entered a Gobber Chef that was on a gaming base, but the paint job on it was just so absolutely fantastic that even though you had all these beautiful display bases, it blew everybody out of out of the pool. It was just awesome.
Well, and to some extent, just like with competitive play, where you only get better by participating, getting that feedback on how to improve, but also practicing, like constantly painting. Whereas, competitive players are constantly playing, competitive painters are constantly painting.
100%. And I think that's been my biggest stressor, is that recently, as I've been painting, I haven't been painting. That's the issue, is the fact that I've had all these fun little models that I wanted to try new things on, and I go to painting classes, and I take the effort to do all that stuff, and then here you are, looking at, here comes a display piece where you're basically stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, I wasn't going to be entering my usual blue and red trolls. I wasn't going to have that. Like, you're talking about a piece that is specific to a certain goal, has a storyline, and that's all you're working, that you're focusing more. It's not focusing on the army as a whole, but you're focusing on, how does the gum line look? How does the lighting work? Does this part of the head work? And I think the thing I learned, and it's actually funny, I'm actually learning more about trying to paint for a painting competition than I did actually participating in it now, is the fact that I pushed myself so much and I stressed myself so much that in the end I actually ended up, I'm not actually getting to enter, because, you have to keep painting. You need to keep yourself, focusing a little bit. So right now I finished, for the most part, cleaning my studio last night. I was up until like 1:30 in the morning. And I will finish it tonight when I get home. And then hopefully this weekend I'll actually be able to do some fun painting, because the main goal for me is I need to paint a little bit. And you need to try and paint a little bit every day, because I think too many people complain like, hey, I can't paint, or hey, I don't have the time to paint. And I think one of the best things I've learned lately, and I mean, it's something I've said a million times, but it was really, pushed onto me, is that one of my dear friends, Chris, Sure, I think that's how I pronounce it, Chris, he has won tons and tons of awards. His models, his competition pieces are some of the best out there. I just absolutely love them. And he just kills it. And he says that he's got a busy life and he paints 1 hour, no matter what, 1 hour a day, when he can, 1 hour. And when you see the amount of detail and the work that he puts out, it's just, and for only an hour a day, and he's obviously not painting every day always. And, he does it in short terms that you can do a lot, And so it's just got to be more or less about what I'm learning is that you need to have fun doing it. So if you're even if you're painting an army, let's not even talk about competition pieces. If you're painting an army, something I'm trying to start doing recently is awarding myself for actually painting. So if I paint a box or a unit and something and I finish it, then I will award myself and get myself something nice. And that kind of treats me that, hey, do I want this insert brand new shiny model here? Well, if I want that model, I need to get it painted. I need to get something painted to award myself, because at some point you end up, your studio ends up looking like mine, where you have shelves and shelves where you have every troll model that's come out for the faction, and you barely have a quarter of it painted,
Yeah, and I guess to some extent the fact of if you want it, then you have to reward yourself. You again, and I'm going to continue to do this because I'm trying to express a point to the listeners. But even in the competitive play, a lot of the players are like, look, I could easily get distracted by all the armies that are out there, but I want to be competitive, so I'm going to focus on this. And once I have focused on an army and I've learned an army enough, and maybe I'm regularly getting that first place in competitions or whatever, then and only then am I going to actually go, all right, now I'm going to step into this new caster or this, I'm going to force myself to play 50 games with this caster before I go and force myself, before I allow myself to go play any other caster in the faction. And I can, again, and maybe this is more just drawing a parallel to the concept of competition, and that no matter what your competition is in, the strategies to be competitive are the same. But one of the things that you were mentioning is that you were having frustrations going down into your studio and painting because everything was kind of in a mess or in a sprawl. And I have to imagine that this is, if I were to draw a gaming parallel, then this would be a situation of going to your local gaming store and just shit's unorganized, you can't find your clock, you don't know where things are, your opponent's just constantly being distracted by things, there's just crap tons of, people's leftover crap are still on the table. Like, you can't play good competitive gaming if you're being distracted by things, if there's, loud music being playing and stuff like that. So it becomes a situation where if you don't organize yourself and focus yourself, then you run into issues. I myself have it where if I'm working on a project, that I don't know how many times this happens. It's like it seems to be a monthly issue with me, which is, I go down and I get ready to start painting something, and some new Grimkin model comes out, or some new model piece or new army comes out or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I want to paint that, or I want to help a friend. I'm going to paint this for them, or, I'm going to do this or going to do that. And then I end up looking at my painting table, and I've got hundreds of different paints on my table because I'm painting 4 or 5 different palettes at the same time. I've got hundreds of different models on the table because I'm, constantly bouncing around, ADD, jumping from model to model that I want to paint. I have interest in painting them all, but they're all over the table. The paints are all over the table. And I get no focus because I sit down, maybe I come to the table with the intent of painting something, but I see something else on the table and I get distracted and want to paint that. So there are many times where when I'm working and I come to the realization of my table is absolutely out of control, I take a night to just clean everything off. I take every single model off, every single paint off, so that I have a clean slate. And then I sit down and go, okay, what are you painting? And only get the paints for that palette, and only get the model for that, or models if I'm painting like units or something like that for that scenario. That way I can force myself to focus. And I think a lot of times that is something that we as hobbyists do that prevent us from keeping to paint. Like we're like, I want to paint, I really should paint, but I'm distracted because my studio is a mess, or anytime I go out to my garage, there's just piles and piles of boxes of unpainted, unput together, even shrink wrapped models in my garage, and I get so distracted or just so disgruntled, and I almost feel like you have to apply an out of sight, out of mind tactic of I have got to get this out of my sight in order to bring focus, in order to keep me hobbying.
And that was actually one of the things that I did last night, is that as I was cleaning my studio, any models that I had a lot of models that I've recently gotten, and I've been like, oh, I'm so excited to paint Madrak 3, or I'm so excited, because Berka is so good, maybe I'll paint Berka, And I still have 4 models sitting on my desk, one of which is 90% complete. Like, it's 90% complete. I could probably finish it in an hour and a half, And it's sat that way now for probably 4 months, 3 months. And that's a huge issue, especially when, you're trying to get stuff done. You've put all this work in. Here it is sitting on the precipice of being complete, and you just don't finish it, So that's something I've definitely had to work on, especially when it comes to my painting ADD, is that even if something is new and shiny and I'm really excited about painting it, I need to finish things before I start something else. Another thing that I've learned that I enjoyed there for a while, and sadly it's kind of fallen apart because I just haven't been able to do it as much. But one of the things I enjoyed right before my son was born was that me and a bunch of friends were actually getting together at our game store, bringing just some paints and stuff, our painting stuff, and we were just hanging out and painting. And I swear to God, when I go to a convention or when I was at these little events that we were running, I was getting so much more work done, like just progressively just knocking shit out, than I was when I was sitting at my studio, because it was always like, oh, I'm sitting here doing this, I got to go do this, or I want to grab this, or hey, maybe I'll quickly throw a magnet into this one. And that kind of plays on what you said, Kevin, which is I was able to remove all of the distraction from my desk or in areas by actually leaving, which is probably why my studio got as dirty as it did. And I was able to actually get a lot done. So, I mean, if you're having a hard time painting, talk to some, local people and see if you guys can set up a painting day where you all meet somewhere, bring some plastic or whatever and just knock some paint off on some models.
See, I have an opposite reaction to that, because I've had painting parties before where it's a situation where and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love painting parties. I love being able to try and work on models and stuff like that and bullshit with my friends. And the best thing about painting parties is that they're not system specific. You can have friends who maybe play other games or who do other things that want to come along and do their hobby time while they're hanging out with you, and that's cool. But for me, I tend to have this situation where I'm like, I sit down, I'm like, cool, while we're having this little painting party, we got beers sitting on the table, maybe there's a movie in the background. Again, I start getting, or I start having a conversation because somebody's talking about things or they want tips or something like that. And I get in this situation where like, fuck, I am just getting distracted every single time from the music and drinking and laughing and having fun, and all of that's great, but it's not helping me getting any painting done.
See, I guess that's why I said I like to go to the game store. That's why I like going to the game store, because when I go to the game store, of course people are playing games and stuff, but they're usually enthralled in themselves. But if you sit there and take so little with you, and, I think that's been working for me a little bit more because I enjoy just like chatting to people. One of the best things is during the Star Wars circuit recently. I don't get to do a lot while we're there because, I'm of course judging and running the event itself. But one of the cool parts is that I know Solus brought one of his models with him one time, and we were just chit-chatting, and he was showing me the face on one of the models he had been working on, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I throw a few little bits of paint on here? I think that, just kind of show you where I really feel it's going to, make it look real nice. And he was like, of course, Devin. So I threw about 20 minutes into that model, and then he was like, holy shit, it looks so much better. Well, somehow that like little bit of painting, that 20 minutes sparked me into this, like, I needed to paint, and it didn't matter. So I actually hadn't brought any of my own painting stuff because I was running the event. So Solus actually went out and got his painting stuff out of his car and a random model that he had, which happened to be a limited edition model. And I painted it in that day. Like, I was like in a frenzy. And I was so happy that I just painted it. And of course, he was happy because he didn't have to paint it. And I just feel like sometimes being around like that aura of just being around people who are gaming and stuff, you know, it made me feel real nice. Because when I'm at home, sometimes for me, like, I have to punish myself because it's like, you know, one of the biggest things recently that's kept me is like, oh, I need to clean my studio. Well, I'll play one game of Heroes of the Storm on my computer. Okay, well, the next thing I know, 4 hours later, I've played, you know, six or eight games, and I haven't done shit. And then my wife comes home, and she's like, hey, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go down and paint, you know, I'm going to go clean up the studio now. And then she's like, well, hang out with me for a bit because I just got home from work. Next thing you know, it's 12 o'clock at night, and you got to go to bed for work, you know? So
no, I definitely see the value of removing yourself from the distractions. I guess I'm just too much of a social butterfly when it comes to, you know, I get distracted by people talking and having fun, and I can't, I've seen people at game stores where they are looking down and they're painting, but they're still participating in the conversation. I guess I'm too mono-focused. Like, if you start talking to me, I put down whatever's in my hand and I start talking back.
See, I'm one of those people, and it's kind of funny. Brendan Culkins, our Plarzoid, him and I, whenever we're around each other, we don't ever look at each other because we're always painting and we're just talking at the model, but we're talking to each other. So the conversations between us are always funny because if you ever see pictures of it, we're both looking down, but we're still conversing. So any pictures where it looks like we're just painting, we're actually having a full conversation. So I definitely feel you on that.
And so removing distractions obviously is one of the things that's going to keep you from painting. You kind of touched on this with your competition paintings, and that's much like when you're playing the game. If you're not having fun playing the army, if you don't enjoy the aesthetics or the way it's playing isn't working, you're not going to get any better with it because you're just going to dread the experience. It sounds like painting's the same thing. If you're not having fun with whatever you're painting, it sounds like you either need to set it aside and come back to it later or just not do it. Like if you're not inspired, and I've had this before where I don't do commission paintings. I actually hate the concept of people coming to me and saying, hey, I'll pay you to paint this, because as soon as money becomes involved, it feels like it's a job, and if it's a job, it's not fun. So mad props to the people out there who do commission painting, because it would kill my enjoyment in painting for me. But I have had times where people come up to me and like, hey, you know, do you mind painting this? Or you want to paint this? Or I will go to them, because one of my Warmachine and Horde bucket lists is I want to paint every single huge base that's ever been produced. So somebody will come along, like a new battle engine or something, or a new Coloss will come out, and I'll be like, hey, can I paint your battle engine? Do you mind if I paint that? That way I don't have to buy it. But you know, I'll do paintings for others. But I've had times where a prime example is that Ironless W wanted me to paint his Convergence. I was like, sure, I'll help you out. I'll paint your Convergence. And I've had that army sitting in the bag in my house for 5 months. And every time I pull it out, I'm like, I really should paint this. He asked me to. And I look at it, I'm like, I am not one bit inspired by these models, and I have no desire to paint them. And I put them back in the box, and they go back in the corner again.
It's because you painted all of mine for me.
I painted yours because I knew if I didn't paint yours, you'd never put them on the damn channel.
That's very true.
I have one for you. So a good friend of mine, and thank God he's a good friend, Ryan Babcock. So 2 years ago, we worked out a little deal, and he asked me to paint a model for him. So, of course, the model took forever to come in. It was a nightmare trying to get a hold of the model, which happened to be the Efreet Scouts. So I finally got it in, was getting ready to paint it, and at this point, 3rd edition drops. Ryan comes to me. We talk about it. He says, hey, man, you know, don't worry about that one. I want you to paint something different. So I said, okay. He says, I'll get it to you. That's fine. So he gets me right around Nova of last year. He gets me, which is in August, and at the end of August, beginning of September for our listeners. So he gets me Rorsch and Brine. And that Rorsch and Brine has sat on my desk painted about 15% now for almost a year. And I don't know what it is, but every time I try and pick it up to work on it, it's just like I always want to try new and exciting fun things or whatever, but I'm just so completely uninterested in that model in every way possible that it's almost like I have this block, which I feel real bad because I should, I'm one of those people that I won't do commission painting. I did it for a little bit while I was in college, and it made me hate my life, mainly because I was painting 40K stuff for other people, and that was just a lot of stuff. And I just hated it, and I wasn't painting my own stuff, and it just was bad. Now I'm more apt that if you were a friend of mine, if you come to me and say, hey, would you be willing to paint this model for me? And as I said, it's usually one model. I would rather do that as a gift for a friend than ever take money for it, And that's definitely been something that in my time has come up. So I need to get that done, hopefully before Nova this year, because I'd actually like to give him the model that he's been waiting on for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not inspired, you can't. It's literally just going to be internal torture to yourself to try and force yourself to paint that. I mean, Tony, I'm assuming you've had similar situations where you're just like, I need to paint this model. I need to paint this model. I just don't want to paint this model.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happened with most of my models that I actually have recently. I'd say the past 2 weeks has really got me excited to play again. So I've actually started building a bunch of my Convergence models that I've had in boxes. So my TEPs together, I'm working on my 6 galvanizers, and afterwards I'm going to start building my Prime Axiom / Prime Conflux, and I'm excited to start painting them, actually. It's something where, especially with my TEP, actually built in a way where the TEP goes together really well, so you actually don't need to glue a lot of the pieces to be able to play it. So I've pretty much pushed it all together. I'm going to play with it, and then in the meantime, I'll be able to pull it apart and paint it section by section, because I think with that model, I already have one, and I wasn't too excited with how I painted it with the first model, because I kind of just glued it all together and then painted it afterwards. So, yeah, but I have had that for a long time where I've just, like, God, I really need to get this painted. I really need this painted. But now it's kind of starting to get, I don't know, I'm getting more excited now.
Oh, it's good to know that your TP's not glued together. That way, anytime I get frustrated by you killing me with all my models with your TP, I can just destroy the model and know that it's okay because we'll just put it back together.
That's hurtful, because, I have 2 TEPs on the table most of the time now.
Not after I get done, you won't.
That's hurtful. That's rude.
Yeah, for me, I tried to, one of my really good friends over in Scotland, John Martin, him and I started doing the thing where we were only playing painted, which was super beneficial for the channel because I was only ever playing painted. But it's definitely become a thing where with Mark III, definitely, I have so much that I had painted in Mark II that's not exactly super competitive in Mark III, that I have so much other stuff that I need to paint that, if you look at a lot of the battle reports that I'm in, I'm usually playing very much the same list. And people are like, why do you play the same list? Like, what is your synergy? Why do you play that list? And it's like, it's because I got it painted. That's about it.
Well, and that was actually one of the things when we started the channel first. One of the things I said was we're not, for any of our battle reports, we're not putting unpainted or proxy models. And the cast has been riding me on it ever since. But I'm firm to that one rule: no proxies must be painted.
Yeah, because it's a pain in the dick.
And actually, it was Solus. He was like, I used to have no problems being able to play unpainted models. And after having to paint my entire Legion, I am incapable of playing the game with unpainted models. And I'm like, I'm willing to accept that as a win for my category.
Which is completely funny, which is super funny because the one of us that has like the most painted stuff is the one who plays the least at this point. So
I know.
And I take so damn long to paint, which I am working on trying to pick up a little bit more speed when I do paint. So I can actually play more. That's actually been something that's hindered my playing, is that, because I said I want to only play painted, it's hindered me because it's like, oh, well, I would want to run 2 bombers. Well, I better paint them up. I got to get those done. I have painted more casters, though, than I would have I've painted 3 casters in the last year, so that's pretty good. Sadly, 2 of them got destroyed on the way to Adepticon due to a case I was testing out for the honest reviews. So I have to go back and fix them.
So do you ever reward yourself for painting? So like right now I'm going through and I'm painting an army, and I'm doing this thing where it's like I paint a unit and then I allow myself to paint like a bigger model or a caster. And then I go back to painting another unit, and then when I finish that, I go on to reward myself with, a solo or a caster or a big, basically like get through this full unit, and then you get to do something cool with a lot of detail and stuff like that.
So funny you mentioned that. So I'm going to speak a little blasphemy, since I have talked so much shit in the past, especially since we have now been doing this version of Turn Extension for almost a year now. But I actually decided, due to a bunch of friends getting into it, I have started to dabble back into Warhammer 40K, not on the competitive side, just because I love the fluff, and I've always had in my head, I played Xeno so much when I was younger, and I played that I've always never dabbled in some of the things I wanted to, especially any of the legions. But I've always had this love for the Thousand Suns Legion. So I'd always had these plans that if I ever had a chance, and, I didn't think that it was going to be absolutely horrible, I wanted to do a very thematic force. Small, but very detailed, thematic, a lot of fun. And also something very different than just painting my blue trolls all the time. So recently, with the release of 8th edition, which has looked really good and everything, I've actually made myself a pledge that I actually bought 1 box of the Scarab Occult Terminators, and I have it written all over my dry erase board that says, once I finish it, which means painted, based, and complete, put into my case, then I will buy another box of something from that army. And then when I finish that, I will buy a 3rd box. And once I have fully built, painted, based 3 units, so probably 2 units and then maybe like a sorcerer or whatever, I have told myself I will actually go ahead and spend the $160 to buy Magnus the Red as just a fun project and just go all out. So it's good you mentioned that, Kevin, because that's been something I've been really excited about. And you could easily do that with, Warmachine and Hordes, where it's like, so many people have a hard time painting units, so then treat yourself, hey, if I paint 2 units, I'll buy myself a new battle engine or a new colossal, or, start a new army. Who cares? You have to, we're human beings, so we don't like doing things unless, there's a positive outcome. And sometimes people aren't so happy with the positive outcome of, hey, I have painted shit. Sometimes that reward system is really beneficial.
So, we've been going on for a bit, and I guess we should probably kill it before Tony kills us. I guess it sounds like, in closing, whether you're in competitive painting or you're in, just painting to get models painted so that you're not playing with plastic or metal, one of the things that's going to keep people painting and keep moving forward is just keeping yourself organized where you do your painting at, and paint what you want to paint. Don't have your table being an absolute mess everywhere. Don't paint something you don't want to, and maybe use a reward system to keep you going, to keep on track and stuff like that, so that you don't get into the situation where the next time you look at your painting table, there's 5 armies waiting for it to be painted. But it sounds like just sometimes, in order to keep painting, you just have to stay a little more focused and organized.
It's kind of funny. Dallas actually has become the where Herman just says, get out there and play. Dallas's slogan recently on his live paint chats has just been, get out there and paint, So it's been kind of funny. I've had, as we've been talking about, like, motivating ourselves to play, you have Dallas out there just trying to motivate people to paint. So, yeah. So, I would definitely like to see if anybody has a, their own tips or tricks of how they motivate themselves to paint, definitely put it in the comments, whether on YouTube or our Facebook channel. And I'm going to hopefully, I'd like to see people's actual studios. Where do you paint at? Show us pictures of how you keep your organization. Do you do better in a complete, shithole mess, or do you have everything pristine, perfect? Stuff like that's definitely interesting to me, and I think we would love to see it. And I think other people would definitely benefit from that.
I'd love to know. I'd love to see pictures of people's paint stations being a complete mess. That way I don't feel like I'm this weird freak who's all by himself.
So since I assume Tony's taking care of his daughter, I'm going to close this out, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of Turn Extension.
Have a good night.
Goodbye.